And my name is Reverend Rēja Joy Green, and I am one of the co-founders of A Course in Miracles Society, A Course in Miracles Original Edition. And what I'd like to do in this presentation is to introduce A Course in Miracles Original Edition. There are a lot of things, even long-term course students don't know about the Course in Miracles, so I'd like to share that. And also, so I've actually developed 3 parts. The first part will be talking about how the course came about, specifically how the original edition came about. But also in part 2, I call it further guidance. And that's when I mention the other scribings. This was a scribed work from Elder Brother Jesus. And there were 2 other works that came through that were mentioned by Jesus as a continuation, which is very wonderful. And then I want to bring in Christian Sundberg. I've become aware of Christian. His experiences, his knowledge is, it encapsulates all 3 of these scribe books for me. And so I wanted to share and have him, become well known so that we can visit, you can all visit and see if it speaks to you and broadens your experience of being here in this realm. But what I'd like to do first of all, so the third part actually is question and answer. But I'd like you to jot down your questions so that you won't forget them. Okay. So what I'd like to do is start with a prayer. And as you know, the Course in Miracles was scribed by Helen Schuckman, and her co-scribe was Bill Thetford, her boss. And Bill was going to give a presentation one time, and he was really he was afraid. He was afraid of something, maybe the audience, maybe the topic, I'm not sure. But he was having concerns about this presentation. And so what Jesus did is he brought through something to give Bill, something for Bill to focus on. And what I'd like to do is share that now with all of us, because we can use it in our lives when we need a reminder that we're not alone and that we do have support. So what I would like to ask you to do is to close your eyes, and I'm going to read what came through for Bill. It's as if it's what Bill needs to repeat, to say. And so I'll begin sharing that now. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent Christ who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because he who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever he wishes, knowing he goes there with me. I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal. Amen. You can open your eyes. We'll begin by asking, what is A Course in Miracles? And the Course is the result of a collaboration between 2 Columbia University psychologists, Dr. William Thetford and his colleague, Dr. Helen Schuckman. Bill was the head of a pre-doctoral program in clinical psychology at Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons, and also an associate professor of medical psychology. And he hired Helen in 1958 as his research assistant. After 7 years, they had been able to bring some organization to the development, but were both still experiencing a tremendous amount of turmoil. One day, Dr. Thetford exclaimed, "There has got to be a better way of doing this." To his surprise, Helen said, "You are absolutely right, Bill, and I will help you to find it." Shortly after this occurrence and throughout the summer of 1965, Helen had a series of psychic experiences. She was somehow able to tell Bill some of the things that he was experiencing on his vacation while she was still in New York. She also became aware of a friend of Bill's who was contemplating suicide. Bill called him, discovered that he was indeed thinking of suicide, and was able to talk him out of it. She also had a series of dream sequences, one of which was where she uncovered a buried treasure box. And when she opened it, There was a manuscript in a black binder with the name Asclepius and pearls on the cover. When she later looked it up, it meant the Greek god of healing. Helen wrote letters to Bill describing her experiences. In one letter, she wrote, quote, "I have the idea I am obeying an order. These orders are rather stern, and the main feeling I get is that I wouldn't dare disobey them. This is the second one." In the fall of 1965, Helen called Bill, saying that the voice refuses to go away. It keeps saying, quote, "This is a Course in Miracles. Please take notes," unquote. She asked Bill, what should she do? Suppose it's crazy. Suppose it doesn't make any sense. And Bill said, well, let's take it down. And if it's gibberish, then no one needs to know. When Helen brought in what she had written the first night and read it to Bill, they were both startled. This is what the notebooks look like. And if you look on the left, about almost halfway down, it says, "This is a Course in Miracles. Please take notes." And then interspaced with other personal notes, there were the beginnings of the principles of miracles. Miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from love is a miracle. And after they took down these notes in her customized shorthand, they later typed them. And they culled out what was part of the course and intermixed with a lot of personal notes. And this is what it looked like at first. And they typed it several times. It started to take form and shape, and it became a manuscript, a completed manuscript. Helen agreed to take the dictation, although she said, if it makes any grammatical errors, if it goofs in any way, then it's had it, and I will refuse to continue. She would take the dictation in her own customized shorthand in the evenings and would come into the office the next day to read the material to Bill. Bill would often jokingly say that although he was Helen's boss, he had become her secretary, typing up her notes. Also, Bill was co-editor of the Journal of Abnormal Psychology at this time, and thought it was ironic that he was constantly turning down manuscripts because they were unscientific. What was this voice? Helen often explained, the voice made no sound, but seemed to be giving me a kind of rapid inner dictation, which could be interrupted at any time and later picked up again. I never knew when I started a sentence how it would end, and the ideas came so quickly, I had trouble keeping up with them. She often disagreed with the content and many times resisted the process. In addition, all of her efforts to lose the material were somehow thwarted. She would accidentally leave the shorthand notebook in a taxi, and it would be returned in New York City. Or a colleague would return a notebook after finding it among report papers. Sometimes she would throw the notebook away, go to bed, but she could not sleep. She would inevitably get up, retrieve the notebook, and continue with the dictation. Schuckman did not claim to be the author of the material herself, and at one point, she wondered, where did this writing come from? Quote, I did not understand the calm but impressive authority with which the voice dictated. It is largely because of the strangely compelling nature of this authority that I have referred to the voice with a capital V. At several points in the writing, the voice itself speaks in no uncertain terms, Jesus. My own reactions, she says, to these references, which literally stunned me at the time, have decreased in intensity and now are at a level of wonder and acceptance. Helen was born Jewish. However, both her parents were non-practicing Jews. She had a Catholic nanny and a Baptist cook, although she later became disillusioned with God, and by this time, she had become a militant atheist. And so, with Dr. Thetford's moral and sometimes physical support in transcribing her shorthand notes, Dr. Schuckman took down some 1,500 typewritten pages of A Course in Miracles. over a period of 7 years from 1965 until 1972. Words as music. As the material developed, a great deal of it became increasingly beautiful. Hundreds of pages are in iambic pentameter. They began to feel as though they were being given words and music at the same time. And this is where I invite you now. Please close your eyes. And I'm hoping I can read this without weeping, because it's the most incredible, the most beautiful part of the course for me, because it does remind me of something. So let us go within now and listen with our hearts. Listen. Perhaps you catch a hint of an ancient state, not quite forgotten, dim perhaps, and yet not altogether unfamiliar, like a song whose name is long forgotten, and the circumstances in which you heard completely unremembered. Not the whole song has stayed with you, but just a little wisp of melody, attached not to a person or a place or anything particular, but you remember from just this little part how lovely was the song, how wonderful the setting where you heard it, and how you loved those who were there and listened with you. The notes are nothing, yet you have kept them with you, not for themselves, but as a soft reminder of what would make you weep if you remembered how dear it was to you. You could remember, yet you are afraid, believing you would lose the world you learned since then. And yet you know that nothing in the world you learned is half so dear as this. Listen, see if you remember an ancient song you knew so long ago and held more dear than any melody you taught yourself to cherish since. You can open your eyes. There was resistance. One day, about halfway through the text, Helen entered the office and was extremely distraught. She told Bill, "This time it's gone off the deep end. It's gibberish, makes no sense, absolutely no sense, no meaning. There's nothing to it. It's absolutely impossible. I refuse to read it to you." Bill calmed her down, and she finally agreed to read the material to him. And here's the end of that section. "Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions, and where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The sleep of forgetfulness is only the unwillingness to remember your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander into temptation, for the temptation of the Son of God is not your will. And let us receive only what you have given and accept but this into the minds which you created and which you love." Amen. And Bill recalls, quote, "At that point, Helen burst into tears. The beauty of the language, the profundity of the thought, and the equivalence of the Lord's Prayer for the course seemed to be so clear." Her mind's amazing. Editing the course. Helen and Bill were given specific instructions by Jesus for the editing of the course. A close study of these instructions reveals two kinds of changes he told them to make. Remove material intended only for you, Helen and Bill, alone. Jesus said to Helen, quote, "This is a private point just for you. It is not part of the course," unquote. Also, he placed Bill in charge of what, quote, "should be included in the written part of the course," unquote. This is implying that there were gray areas that required a judgment call. In another place, Jesus said, quote, "Nothing that relates to a specific relationship belongs in the notes," unquote. One time, Jesus told Helen that she was taking, quote, "much more personal than usual notes," unquote, and that these did not have the more generalizable quality which this course is aimed at, meaning generalizable to others. However, at the same time, she wrote down a very personal experience. But in this case, Jesus said, "What you wrote can be useful to miracle workers other than yourself, unquote. So the principle was very simple. If what you write is so personal that it cannot benefit others, take it out. And the second instruction was that he corrected scribal errors. He would say, this should be God, not Christ, or this God should be read Christ, or the Father and the Son are not identical, but you can say like Father, like Son. The first part of the material lasted 3 years, a 622-page volume. And when asked how she would know when it was completed, the voice told her that she would hear the word amen. And after about 9 months, Helen became restless and one day began to take down the workbook for students, which took about 2.5 years. A few months later, a third volume was announced as Manual for Teachers. Bill and Helen realized that there was a large amount of personal material included in what had been transcribed. They asked and received information regarding the editing changes, as we've discussed. And the final retyping and editing were completed in September 1972. In May of 1973, Ken Wapnick, a clinical psychologist, was introduced to the course for the first time by Helen and Bill. He soon realized that this would be his life's work. The manuscript he was shown was the one that had been retyped several times by Helen and Bill, in which the personal and specific references were removed. They had presented the same manuscript to Hewlin Casey, son of Edgar Casey and head of the Association for Research and Enlightenment. Ken recalls, quote, some of the titles I felt were not appropriate to the section. The capitalization, to show emphasis using a typewriter, was inconsistent. The paragraphing was inconsistent. The punctuation was inconsistent, unquote. Helen and Ken began in the fall of 1973 to edit the entire manuscript, line by line, word by word. It took about a year. Bill chose not to be involved in the editing. Then it was published. A Course in Miracles was copyrighted and published in 1975 by the Foundation for Inner Peace. However, in 1996, Endeavor Academy, a spiritual community, was sued by Foundation for Inner Peace for copyright infringement. And yet, there are miracles to come from that lawsuit. During the discovery phase of the litigation against Endeavor Academy, an earlier manuscript of the Course, now known as the Hewlin Casey version, was discovered in the library of the ARE. This is the copy that was given to Hewlin Casey by Helen and Bill once they had finished retyping the original manuscript. Bill and Helen wanted to know if the ARE might publish it. Hewlin declined to publish it, but wished them success in their endeavors. He said the material was very much in line with what his father brought through. It has been said that permission was given to copy and return the document to the locked room it was stored in. Afterward, it was transcribed into electronic form and placed on the internet by anonymous parties. When the HLC manuscript was discovered in 1999, it was essentially equivalent to the finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Course community was previously told that only minor changes in punctuation and title headings had been made during the editing project of 1975. They had no idea until the discovery in 1999 that major portions of the first several chapters had been removed, and there were changes throughout all 3 books. Many of the capitalized words that show emphasis on a typewriter were changed to lowercase, with only a few of those italicized. Sections were rearranged and major portions were deleted. References to soul were changed to other words, such as creation, you, and spirit. The digitized copy was emailed to a course student, Tom Whitmore. Realizing the beauty of the material and wanting to get it out into the world, Tom Whitmore was a Creighton graduate and practicing lawyer in Omaha, along with a few devoted course students, formed a nonprofit organization called Course Miracle Society. or Sims, and published the manuscript under the name Jesus Course in Miracles. And this was in 2000. They were soon presented with a restraining order and were forced to stop distributing the book, but not before Mary Ann Williamson and Doreen Virtue had received copies. And most importantly, Tom influenced Endeavor Academy to emphasize pre-copyright distribution instead of the argument that it was a channeled work and could not be copyrighted. And then when they had a summary judgment hearing in 2002, the judge threw out all claims other than pre-copyright distribution and left that one for trial. Establishing that there were previously distributed copies before 1975 version was copyrighted was a crucial part of the defense. And a member of the Course in Miracles Society was traveling and stopped in to see Lee Flynn, a fellow course student who lived in Santa Fe. During that visit, she felt an inner prompting to mention to Lee Sims was looking for proof of pre-copyright distribution in order to win the case and overturn the copyright. Lee recalled that he had recorded a Judy Scutch presentation. He's a video photographer, and he was assigned to that presentation back in the 1970s. And in that presentation, Judy Scutch had talked about all the enthusiastic copying and distributing of the course prior to the time that it had been published. Lee thought he had a copy of the tape. After a few days, he found it, sent it to the judge. That tape became the crucial piece of evidence that decided the outcome. The copyright was deemed null and void. Part two is, I call it further guidance. And the first picture on the left there is Marie Perron, and she's a Course in Miracles student, but she was informed in a dream that there would be a new course. And she started the transcription of the material given to her in 1998 and published the work 3 years later. It was called The Course. And Jesus in the Course described it as a continuation of A Course in Miracles, although those words could not be used because the copyright was still in force at that time, 2001. Subsequently, 2 more books came through Mari, the treatises and the dialogues. And along with the course, she self-published all 3 books in 2006. And by this time, she was able to say and include the words that it was a continuation of A Course in Miracles. The middle picture is Sebastian Blaxley, who is a scribe in Argentina. He began his journey very early on. While in a family of 15 brothers and sisters, at the age of 6, he was involved in a horrific car accident, and one of his brothers passed away. He heard and felt at that time a presence, and the presence said, "Be not afraid, I am with you." He heard and sensed that presence all that day, going to the hospital, always, "Do not be afraid, I am with you." And that presence, Jesus, stayed with him always, his entire life. He then, in 2010, Sebastian was in a chapel at Easter time, and in the chapel was a copy of A Course of Love by Marie Perron. I'm sorry, in 2010 it was A Course in Miracles, that's right. And so he became a course student for 6 years. And in 2016, in the same chapel, on Easter, there was Marie's book, The Course of Love, that it was Jesus, the author, and he wanted to get the Course of Love in Spanish because he searched and it was not available. And so he did work for the next 2 years to get that translated. And then in 2018, he had a visitation from Archangel Raphael and Archangel Gabriel, and they let him know that he would be bringing through 7 books called Choose Only Love. He was told he would be, quote, a pencil in the hand of God. And so this, I just want to share the website so you can gather more information about Course of Love, Marie Perron, chooseonlylove.org, Sebastian, and also Christian Sundberg. Now, Christian had a pre-birth experience that he recalled at the age of 30 when he was meditating, and he remembered early childhood memories that he had, that 5 or 6 years old, that he had totally forgotten. And then he remembered his experience of being a soul before incarnating for this time, and much more. Now, the word Christ doesn't appear anywhere in his book, but it is filled with the Christ mind. The Course of Love, just to brief a little bit about the Course of Love in the middle, in the gold part, those are the 3 books that came through. The Course was the teachings, much like the text in A Course in Miracles. The treatises integrate the teachings, much like the lessons in A Course in Miracles, and the dialogues are an encouragement to be the Christ self. And this is a picture of Archangel Raphael in the green and Archangel Gabriel in the pink. And these are the books that came through. They came through with music and symbols and choir of angels, and then the symbols became words. And he describes the whole process in the beginning of each book. And then, of course, Christian Sundberg, finally, I think in 2021, put his experience in a book, which I feel as though it encapsulates all of the teachings that I have learned in A Course in Miracles and A Course of Love and Choose Only Love. And for me, is definitely a continuation. It speaks, I think, to people who maybe don't have a Christian background, because the Choose Only Love is very, very Christian terminology, as well as A Course in Miracles. And so then I think what I'd like to do, I know we're going over on time, so I just wanted to show this. I have 4 of these slides, but we can talk perhaps about them in the question and answer time. But here's an example. This theme is spacious self enfolding the ego. And it's tempting to think that evil, the devil, ego is separate from the good, from God. But actually, I'm learning that there's nothing separate from the all that is, by definition. And so we see this echoed in all 4 of these teachings. So beautifully, in A Course in Miracles, the mind chose to divide itself, but it could not entirely separate itself from the soul. It is from the soul that it derives its whole power to create. Even in miscreation, will is affirming its source, or it would merely cease to be. You will see, in A Course of Love, you will see that the house of illusion was just a structure built within the universe of truth, and that the universe of truth contains everything within its benevolent embrace. No one stands beyond the embrace of love. And you will be glad to see that those who remain within the house of illusion could not escape love's presence. I'm not doing all the slides, just this one. Now, remaining in the silence, this is Choose Only Love. Now, remaining in the silence of your hearts, you are in the perfect condition to observe without judgment how the house of cards was built, to observe the strength of fear within the realm of love. You can observe the house of shadows within the abode of light, the palace consecrated to illusion with the infinity of truth, and the house of fear inside the house of truth. So beautiful. And Christian Sundberg said, we are part of Source, and Source is unconditionally loving, just as we are completely free So we are permitted to choose even an experience in which we may make imperfect choices. Our true nature cannot change. None of us are ever truly in danger. So I'll just mention another common theme is the nature of reality. And when you visit this video later, you can read these 4 sections and see for yourself. The next one is the Christ in you. Also 4 comparisons. And the last one is our purpose, extending love. Now, first one was unfolding the ego, and we went over that. And the second one is the nature of reality, true thought. And this relates to what I just said, that we are an idea in the mind of God. And of course, ideas are of the mind. What is projected out and seems to be external to the mind is not outside at all, but an effect of what is in and has not left its source. This is my favorite area. This is a quote from the Course. Mind reaches to itself. It does not go out. Within itself, it has no limits, and there is nothing outside it. It encompasses everything. That in itself is, I think, for me, mind-blowing. Well, I'm just blessed. Thank you for this opportunity.
I'm sorry, I muted myself instead of unmuting. Reverend Rēja, great to see you again. Really enjoyed your presentation. Been many years since I really delved into the Course, but this was brought some of the salient points back. So it was really good to hear it refreshed again. But lots of love to you, and thank you for your time.
Okay, I'll hand over to Wendy now for the second half.
Reverend Rēja, can you tell us about your Thursday night group for people who might like to go further with you and learn more about the Course in Miracles Society and what you do there? Could you give us some details on that?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. We've had this group. We had it in person before the pandemic. Then, we had to go to Zoom. My husband facilitates, I co-facilitate. And we just kept it within the people that pretty much are in Omaha, that used to meet in person. And then I've been sharing about it more widely, and more people are coming, and it's just wonderful. We have such wonderful energy. We had a person from Africa, and from Modesto from Venezuela, and all over Bahamas. Couple people from Omaha. Anyway, the way you can come, anyone. It's open to absolutely anyone. You can go to our website, which is, and I can put it in the chat, jcim.net. Hold on. And you go to our website and go to events. And right under that menu item, events, is ACIM Zoom group. It's got all the information. I update it every week, so you know what we're going to read. You know where you can access what we're going to read. You don't have to buy the book. And there's previous recordings, so you can watch what has occurred before. See if that's something you want to do. Everything's right there.